The world is collapsing. The best example is the Russia-Ukraine World War. Today, we are about to discuss the topic Soviet-Ukrainian War. Ukraine will never give up the fight. Before we move on to the video, let me remind you to like and subscribe to this channel if you like this video. Press the bell icon to get a notification for our upcoming video. Welcome back to another video of the military's future. Without further delay, let's move on to our video. In a speech on Independence Day, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky declared that his nation would resist Russia's invasion to the end and would not make any concession or compromise. In an emotional speech to commemorate Ukraine's 31 years of independence from the Soviet Union, the president promised Ukrainians that their nation would never give up its fight for independence from Moscow. He said that when Russia attacked, Ukraine was reborn. We simply care about our land. We don't care about how big your army is. On Wednesday, which also marks 6 months since the start of Russia's invasion, Zelensky declared in a video speech, "We will fight for it until the very end." Scary, right? In front of the imposing monument in central Kiev, honoring the country's 1991 independence from the Russian-dominated Soviet Union, the 44-year-old president gave a speech while dressed in war fatigues. Zelensky emphasized Ukraine's escalating war posture, which opposes any sort of deal that would let Moscow to secure territorial gains, including large portions of the southern and eastern Ukraine seized during the previous 6 months. According to him, Ukraine no longer considered the conflict to be over when the fighting ceased, but rather when Kiev ultimately triumphed. Now I guess you really get an idea of what's going on. When you speak to people on the streets, they are certain that Ukraine must fight back, despite the immense suffering of the conflict, that the lost lands must be reclaimed. People will tell you when you talk to them that they want to be further from Moscow's totalitarian leadership and more towards Europe, freedom and democracy, and a free press, Bo added. After repelling Russian forces at the beginning of what Moscow refers to as a special military operation, Ukrainians are preparing for a protracted war and a terrible winter of energy shortages. According to Western military sources, Russian forces are reportedly making little progress in their offensive operation in Ukraine's eastern and southern regions, who liken the conflict to the long, deadly, attritional fighting in the First World War. The Kremlin's announcement of martial law's components and the selection of General Sergei Surovikin as the new commander of Russia's special military operation in Ukraine provides some hints about Russia's medium-term military and political objectives in Ukraine. Here comes the interesting part. The mission and tactics of Surovikin can be summed up as a shift to strategic defense across the board, with the potential for decoy assaults and localized tactical offensives to strengthen Russia's positions. In the areas it has controlled, Russia plans to erect a strong and resilient line of defense to thwart any significant incursions by the Ukrainian military or any redrawing of the new lines. To put it another way, Russia wants to stop the intense fighting before winter arrives, thereby putting an end to the war and preserving the territorial gains it has already won. The Russian command can currently only do that. There is absolutely no chance of a brand new, massive offensive into Ukrainian territory. Russia is unable to conduct offensives against a more well-equipped adversary due to a critical lack of current military equipment. Moscow needs a long break from the conflict to almost completely rebuild its combat-ready ground forces. As President Vladimir Putin explicitly acknowledged, just a partial mobilization was required to maintain a front line 1,000 kilometers long. Because of the inadequate training and supplies provided, newly mobilized troops cannot be employed in offensive actions. But even people armed with 50-year-old AKM automatic rifles will do in order to maintain control over the land that Russia has taken behind the lines. With regard to moving troops to more advantageous defensive positions that the Ukrainian forces cannot breach, the new commander for operations in Ukraine has the ability to make tough decisions. They will evacuate even if it means ceding control of sizable, difficult-to-defend territory like the northern part of the Luhansk region or the right bank of the Dnieper River. In order to reduce the possibility of internal unrest in Russia, Surovikin will be held accountable for these choices. By the middle of March, when Russian troops were unable to enter Kiev, the battles had already been lost, and those objectives were now impossible to accomplish. In April, along with a few divisions from around Kharkiv, Moscow withdrew its worn-out divisions from the area surrounding Kiev, Chernihiv and Sumy, it forfeited the opportunity to dictate the conditions of Kiev's submission by doing this. The conflict between the Russian-controlled portion of Ukraine's physical borders was going on from April to September, except for the northern part of the Luhansk region. It was obvious by August that the army of contract troops and the military equipment at their disposal were not enough to significantly increase the area under Russian control, beyond what they had taken in February and March. I know you all are really into this video, but let me stop you by reminding you to like and subscribe to this channel if you like this video. At a recent press conference in Astana, Putin outlined the new political objective of the special operation, which is to maintain a Russian land corridor to Crimea, along the shore of the Azov Sea and along the left bank of the Dnieper River, in order to ensure that Kiev no longer controls the Crimean Peninsula water supply. Therefore, it is more crucial for Russia to maintain control over the southern cities of Mariupol, Berdyansk, Melitopol and Nova Kakhovka than it is for it to maintain control over the western cities of Kherson and the Donbas cities of Lysyansk and Severodonetsk. One such tough decision that Surovikin can now make on his own is this one. Guess what happened? This takes us to the second element of Surovikin's plan: to pressure Ukraine to end the active phase of conflict, to freeze the front lines and to engage in negotiations on Russian conditions that have been amended to reflect the new practical objective of the special operation. Russia uses drones and airstrikes to assault Ukraine's energy infrastructure because of this. Severe power outages hinder Kiev's ability to fight a war and will eventually have an influence on supplying the troops, which will impede the Ukrainian advance. The incapacity of Russia's air force and reconnaissance assets to defeat Ukraine's air defenses and establish aerial dominance, however, poses a serious obstacle. The air bombardment strategy adopted in Syria, also led by Surovikin, where Russia's adversary lacked access to a cutting-edge air defense system, cannot be used in Ukraine. Russia is currently prevented from compelling Ukraine to make peace and accept what it sees as the new geographical realities by three considerations. The first is that even after freezing the front lines, the Kremlin is not ready to completely halt its operation, in the hope that this might result in a reduction in US military aid for Ukraine. It has been suggested to wait for Donald Trump to win the re-election, or at least for a Republican victory in the US midterm elections. Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader of the House of Representatives, has hinted that this is a possibility. However, it appears that a sizable portion of this faction will back the predicted $50 billion investment for Kiev by the end of the year, before the Republicans take control of the House in January of 2023. In any event, relying on shaky political analysis of the United States that has often led the Kremlin astray is hardly a plan. There were also expectations that the European Union would be forced to negotiate with Moscow over Ukraine as a result of the energy crisis. But the EU opted to weather the economic storm. Whether the Kremlin is willing to halt its operation will determine whether or not it is possible to have meaningful discussions with Kiev about tough decisions and the best course of action. For obvious reasons, neither Kiev nor its Western allies are interested in a straightforward ceasefire, even if it is prolonged. This furthers the second issue. Moscow is unable to unilaterally declare an end to the hostilities as long as Ukraine is making every effort to liberate the region that Russia now occupies. That's all about today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed our video. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Press the bell icon to get notified of our upcoming video, and please check out our other videos.